world of a mind that is wandering beneath your feet. This is the podcast for those that wonder. This is a podcast, if you dare to subscribe. Open the doors as we take you into the mind of a burger.
Well, welcome to today's podcast, the third episode of Mind of a Burger podcast. Now, obviously, we're going to be discussing fidget toys, imaginary friends, all that kind of thing. But today's tip of the day is all about anxiety and not try and address attention to yourself when travelling out and about. We're going to be talking about more on anxiety later on in the podcast. And obviously we're going to bring things onto hygiene and things like that. So obviously this is more of a well-polished one. And this is a take two as well to the whole podcast, since there's things in the episode that just didn't go very well. I'm also doing a radio play for the imaginary friends. Oh, just a second. Hello? Is that Imaginary Andy speaking? Definitely, you are welcome to the podcast. Where are you at the moment? Oh, you're in that imaginary pub, Pine Trees? Well, get yourself down to the studio and I'll see you in a bit. Okay, bye for now. There you go, folks. That's just to show that Imaginary Andy will be on the podcast. Now, we do the first bit as a bit of a blog. I'm playing with a fantastic fidget toy. Just to say, my other fidget toy is broke, but I'm still keeping hold of it because I like the feel of it, even though it doesn't flash. I've got my lightsaber that's a flashy toy as well. But I'm playing with my fidget cube at the moment. It's brilliant. I might do a review of that later on in this podcast, but it's fantastic. Does the job. You can press buttons, you can flick switches, you can breathe, it's got nice smooth sides to it and all that kind of stuff. So that's coming up in the podcast, actually, me reviewing the fidget cube. But at the moment, I'm just going to have a fidget with it while I'm doing this part of the podcast. So, I've been reading quite a few Facebook posts before I did this podcast on a lot of it was to do with anxiety and the stuff about cleanliness, which is coming on later on in the podcast. But I feel that having a voice for me as an Asby is pretty important. Some will know me as just this visual impaired person that's got Leber's congenital anaerosis and has nothing more. For those who've been following me since the pilot podcast, which is the pilot podcast is going on YouTube by the end of this week. So I'm really sorry if those haven't heard the pilot podcast yet. But for the rest of you, you're following it not just on YouTube, but you're also following it on Buzzsprout as well, which is where we've also got the podcasts going. And these podcasts are a voice for the people that need that. It's all great me going to these huge conferences and standing up going, "Hello everybody, my name is Stephen Ball and I'm an alcoholic. I mean, I've got Asperger's syndrome and I've had it since this age and that age and the other age." I'm sure you're sick of hearing that, which is why I don't do all of that. This is a series of podcasts that, but I was reading something quite interesting, listening to something quite interesting on YouTube about that. I was listening to some Tony Attwood. He's like he is the go-to for people with autism. He wasn't one of the founders, but he gave people with autism of what. Oh, I've just found something new with the cube. This must be off an old mouse. Anyway, that was so random. Ooh, does that click? Wow, that is so new. I need that. I can spin that. Right, sorry. I was talking about Tony Attwood, wasn't I? And then I started fiddling with the cube. Tony Attwood is basically he's given us a voice, really. In terms of autism, and some people with autism, they can't speak very well, but we can express. Now, even though some things I can't communicate with, I will express that, and in many ways. Or sometimes I don't know how to express it, and sometimes it's come out in quite an explosive way. It's just that's the way it should be viewed, and I don't know. We have to think of what our minds can do, what our minds can take in. Sensory deprivation for some people can be because spaces are amplified into a way, they're amplified and compressed into a way which makes them feel claustrophobic or anything. I only have one sensory deprivative thing that I struggle with, and we're going to come to it later on in the podcast. But I just feel that autism has its own voice. I mean, I was a bit annoyed that back in the early days that my father, my real father, his his side didn't really see it all that much, and even though he worked in the mental health industry, he didn't really want to take on the Asperger's syndrome on board, which is why it's been the unwanted child in the room, if you get me. And I hate to say that like it is, but that's what Asperger's is. To probably, if for me, that's the way it's been. It's been like there is just me and my sister and whoever else, but there is nobody else. And that's the way my Asperger's has been addressed. And there is no warnings here. There is any of my family, siblings, whatever, listening to this podcast right at this moment, and they've subscribed to it. And I'm not apologising for putting this bit in, because the podcast is the voice for me to scream out. And I feel that the Asperger's syndrome for me is the child that's had that voice and it's been screaming for ages that, hang on, it's like it's been like a child it's like the invisible child that's been abandoned. There's a great song that by Metallica on one of their albums, and it's the invisible kid being locked where he hid. Something about being down the drain. I can't remember the full lyric. It's off the album. It was off that album that had some kind of monster on it. I've forgotten the album title. Saint Anger. There we go. It's off that album. And I just thought, there are parts of me in that song. The invisible kid. It's like the invisible kid is something, he's in the corner of the room. Yeah, he's always probably the well-behaved boy, probably, or well-behaved girl. But in actual fact, the invisible kid is not always well-behaved. The invisible kid is trying to scream out, and the invisible kid is actually causing the non-visible person to do more wrong things. So the invisible kid doesn't actually sit in the room. He sits in the room, or she sits in the room with the peers and does what he or she is told. But in actual fact, that invisible kid is making the visible kid do all the wrong things, to the point where when the visible person slips out of line, that was the invisible person's job to make the visible person do that. And that's been the Asperger's syndrome through most of my life, because on the thing, it was like me talking to myself. And it's like, oh, well, he can stop that. Or, it's like, well, hold on a second. Don't you know it's a problem? You haven't even sat down with me and talked with me about it properly. And yes, I am angry at the other side of my family. If they don't like it, they can unsubscribe from this podcast, if they are subscribed to it. Then, I just don't care. I'm so rebellious. There are people that don't like me for it, and to be frankly honest, I don't give a damn. I am a broadcaster who speaks for people with mental health problems, and advocate for them to speak about it. It annoys me when they go into the broadcasting industry, don't speak about it, then have a problem and walk out. And I've seen it happen. And I spoke about this on my last podcast. Obviously not to the extreme, because I was speaking about it as a careers guide. And I'm not going to touch on it because it's not really a touchy thing. But me, a person with Asperger's syndrome that still has imaginary friends, that still has a very strong imagination. My imagination's probably weakened amongst the years, because probably people haven't been as uncomfortable with it or as upset. And if they are, probably they know it's, it's like probably living with somebody that's got a heroin addict. They'll probably find it comfortable over time, but they'll be okay with it in the long run. And that's the way I see things. Now, you as the audience, the viewer, you'll know that, autism is a really cool thing to talk about and notice about. I did the walk for autism as an autistic person, so I could do it as a package, and people were amazed that I did it, and I raised about £30 doing it, and I gave a lot of that to the autism initiatives. I went on the treadmill thing that they had, and hopefully, if there are next year, maybe I might do something for the podcast with autism initiatives in mind. But I feel that I've had some social issues due to my autism at school. There was a lot of people that didn't want to know me because I was weird and stuff. And I probably didn't really care. Being forced to conform in front of your family is not really a bad thing. It's not really, it's not going to kill you in the long run. However, when you grow up and you decide to be a non-conformist, so you leave school and you leave college, and you've got your own life and you've got your own mind, then probably deciding not to conform to anybody else is probably a really good thing too, because then the people that you go to, there is a friend on Facebook that's not talking to me because she knows that I'm not conformed anymore, and so be it. And I have also been last year and this year, I have become a voice for the mental health industry, not as a person with Asperger's syndrome, as a person with a learning difficulty, and that doesn't worry me that too much, because a lot of Asbies face some of the same issues that a person with learning difficulty will face anyway. The way we see and view the world is probably different to how someone else will view it. There was one time when I didn't watch the news or read the papers, and when I started reading the papers, there were things in there that I thought very differently. The only things that I probably read back in the heydays was Sound on Sound. But I might as well, since this is an Asperger's podcast, I might as well tell you guys how I'm feeling today. And today I'm feeling quite perked up, really. It's a Sunday when I'm recording it. I'm going to record the rest of it tomorrow afternoon. And so, yeah. I'm a bit upset that one of the zips broke on my bag. Mummy's sorting out with a new man bag. But it was partly my fault I broke the zip, but partly wasn't, because it was stuck anyways with the cloth. But zips and me, oh gosh, that is a thing in itself, isn't it? But yeah, I'm fairly cool about stuff. I've seen my gran today. I've been to church today. I've played the drums. But yeah, it is what it is. That's a Sunday. But yeah, I had a pretty cool week last week. I've basically there wasn't anything that upset me or anything last week. Started the group back and Salvation Army and McGill Radio and everything, so there's nothing that what's name done. I'm glad Christmas and New Year is out the way. It's not that I hate Christmas or anything, but once you've had Christmas Day and that, it becomes to the point where, come on, I want my groups to start, I want places to open, I just want things to become normal again. And because I don't have a job as such, it's not, and nothing that I need to worry about. Because I just think that, I like the fact that I can do what I want mostly, but, I like it when shops are open, places are open, and I can get out of the house. So yeah. I'm also going to talk about meltdowns in the next section of this podcast, because in episode 2 we talked about mental health in the broadcasting industry, and this week I'm going to talk about meltdowns. So this is how the podcast will go. You'll have your intro, you'll have your me just talking about stuff in the intro, just bringing people to the podcast. It's lovely and warm in the studio today, by the way. It's been horrible outside. It didn't half throw it down with rain. On the day of recording the podcast, the day I put it out, I don't know what it's going to be. But yeah, it chucked it down with lots of rain today. It's just windy and horrible. So yeah. I want to apologise for the last episode. Putting it out, I had some technical difficulties with the website that I'm putting it out to. And for those that are following me on Buzzsprout, I've got till the 10th of April with them. I need to email them about it because that is a thing. So I suggest you subscribe to my YouTube, Mind Mob YouTube channel. I'm keeping all my stuff on there because setting up a YouTube channel for this is a bit iffy at the moment. But yeah, this is my current thing as well. But yeah, we're going to be talking about meltdowns, and I've got a meltdown story to tell you. Just before I move on, I want you to check out a YouTuber. His name is Kevin Chapman. He's got a son called Andy. He's got other channels as well. He's a geek like myself. I don't know. I'd say he's a geek / nerd, because there's some stuff he does that's quite nerdy. Some stuff he does that's quite geeky. But he does some fantastic vlogs, and he covers autism. He's covered a lot of autism things as well. Another YouTube channel I suggest you check out is Fathering Autism. So they're the 2 YouTube channels I suggest you check out as well. Excuse me. Because they're the YouTube channels I suggest check out. And yeah. Also, before we move on to the next section, I just want to say about the lounge in the Cambridge Walks. You want to spend some time? You want to kill some time? In fact, do you want to spend a bit of time? As much or as little as you want. Cambridge Walks, there is the lounge there, and also the autism group, Asperger's group, runs on a Thursday there too as well. If I have any more Asperger's news, I'll share it with you in the future podcasts, and certain things I'll do episodes on. In this episode, we are covering anxiety and all that kind of stuff, and we've got the imaginary friends bit, but that's going to be towards the end of the podcast, as always. In later podcasts, we're going to have interviews, just so it makes the podcast sound a lot better. We're going to have, in episode 4, I want to tell you now what's happening in episode 4, so you're aware of it. We're going to have an interview with Frida of Fairness. For those of you who don't know who Frida of Fairness is, she is an acronym for the Speaking Up for Yourself group that the Hesketh Centre run. But I'm going to get somebody to play Frida. So for anyone who wants to know what Frida is and Frida's about, check out episode 4 of the Mind of a Burger podcast. Right, well, we're going to move on now, and we're going to move on to the next part of the podcast. And we're back. And in this part of the podcast, I'm talking about meltdowns and how you can cope with meltdowns and how to get into the state of a meltdown. Have I had meltdowns? Yes. I've had meltdowns, but I don't have... my meltdowns are quite different to somebody, how they like have a meltdown. My meltdowns are... What do I do? Kind of... You know... So I'm freaking out inside. I'm not going, ah, or whatever. However, people have meltdowns. And it's a horrible thing for anybody to go through. The first meltdown I ever had, I was back at school. And I was in year 12 and stuff was going around. I was going out with a girlfriend at the time and I was trying to sort her out, and she had her own problems, and she wasn't talking to me. And I was in chapel, and my English teacher, she sat me down, and she said, "Look, we're a family." She got everybody to sit together, and everybody that whole day was really concerned about me. You know, I remember going into another teacher's class, and she said, "Look, Stephen," she said, "everything's going to be fine. You know, it's going to be all good. You know, you're moving on, blah blah." So, literally, it was just the moving on period. When I was at my dad's next door neighbour's house, the same thing happened again, and it was like life had hit me in the face. I really didn't know how to explain it, but now I know I was having a meltdown, and it was horrible. It was that meltdown. I didn't scream, I didn't shout, I didn't lie down on the floor and thrash my feet around. I just sat with my head in my hands, as if the world had slapped me in the face. As literally, like, as if it kicked me up the rear. You know? That's the only way I can describe it, you know? And it just didn't feel good, you know? All the things that it should have done, I should have felt, you know, I was excited. I was moving on to college. I was... going on a different adventure. My life was turning a different corner, but it was struggling to turn that different corner. I don't like it when I'm turning around that different corner. That's when I have my meltdowns, because I can't cope with the change. The thing is to prepare yourself for change all the time. It's not going to work for everybody. I think when you're thrown into that change, that's when a lot of meltdowns occur. You know, and it's just one of those things where people have those like types of meltdowns. You hear of people dropping to the floor and screaming and all this kind of thing. And it's uncontrollable, because for them you've got the anxiety. In a meltdown, you've got everything. You've got the anxiety, you've got the shock. It's like you're being electrocuted. It's that kind of feeling, because you don't know whether to be anxious or shocked. You don't know what to do, but it is anxiety which is working in the background. And because it's all like, because the way it's working, for example, like you don't know, like when you're having a meltdown, your body is literally doing that. It's literally melting down. It's like plugging a pair of small voltage speakers into a huge amp. Those speakers aren't going to take that amp. It's going to melt the speakers. But it's like being plugged into a large amp, you know? At the sudden, it's like, hang on, it's like this voltage is too high. It's taking the low voltage. Boom. You don't know what to do. You sort of freeze. You sort of, you know. The second time I had, a meltdown was before I left college, and I was going to a different college. And again, everything was all in place. It was all working out. It was all good. I was leaving college, and I was ready to go and everything, and I just didn't know what to do. I just sat silently in break, and I was just shocked this one day, and everyone was asking, "Hey, Stephen, are you okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. You know, I'm just taking stuff in, and it's hard to take things in, you know." But then I really was because your nerves kick in and everything. And I was exhausted because my brain's taking all that change in all at once. But the last time I had a meltdown was when my ex went on holiday, and Shelby contacted me, and I was like, you know, as it's like, but you don't know what to do. And the reason why some autistic people shout and scream when they're in a meltdown is because they don't know what to do. It's the people, when you have a meltdown, you don't know what to do. Your body doesn't know what to do. Your mind doesn't know what to do. It's like you're neither shocked or you're neither. It's like you don't know whether to be shocked, angry, upset. It's all emotions. It's like if you got a mixing bowl and threw all your emotions in a mixing bowl, and instead of stirring it, you shake it. But then you don't do anything with that mixture. You don't throw it. You don't turn the bowl upside down. You don't do anything, but you just shake it. And parts of that mixture explodes out of the bowl. And you've got this mess of mixture, which you don't know what to do. You don't know how to stir it. You don't know how to bash it or thrash it. You don't know what to do with this mixture. This mixture is just something that you throw in a bowl. And that's how I see a meltdown. Now, I don't have a lot of meltdowns because I've managed to deal with a lot of issues, a lot of change. Now, I find change hard to deal with. But when I was in my teens, change, man, it was really hard to deal with. It was the most difficult thing to deal with. It really was. And I panicked about change. I remember going back to in the last year of school, and they had change to the times and everything. But yeah, I was. So yeah, and then when I went to college, there was lots of change. So there was like, you could wear your own clothes. You could call tutors by their first name, which I did. That was the first thing I did when I went to college. I wore my own clothes. I called tutors by their first name, and I could have banter with certain people you couldn't have at school. It was just like, um, that was the aim of college. Because when you move from school to college, it is. I'm telling you something. It is like, it's not just a small tiny step, because it was like when I moved from junior school to senior school, because the senior school was in the same school as the junior school, so it wasn't like I had to move schools entirely. I just moved from one wing to another wing. But the change in senior school was, it was like, I don't know, people were more serious. It was like, you've got to behave this way and stuff, and you got involved in a lot of issues. Maybe I'll talk about in another episode, but I didn't really have a meltdown from moving from one school to the next. The thing that, I did have not a meltdown, but I had a major issue with was coping with the work in senior school, and they wanted you to just do it, and it's like, why? I felt that I was assessed wrong, but because I had so much imagination, and so when I was in secondary school, I had a lot of baggage. And some really cool stuff happened when I was in secondary school, but then again, when things stopped and I learnt that things stopped, and I didn't know what to do. And I'm so glad that I've got the confidence that I've got now to do the things that I can do. Go out to different groups and stuff and meet different people. And there are other transitions, obviously, that's going to happen in my life. But, when you go from school to college, it's not just one little step. It's one huge, massive leap. Even if you know that everything's okay, prepared, it's going to be different environment, living environment, different people, different things, different issues. You've got different people. Everything's different. And you've got to cope with that. And that's just how it is. And you've got to learn that things that people prepare you for, they prepare that for you, so obviously you can move on. But obviously more radically now. And I think another reason why I found it hard to change was they just sorted out a school leavers program, which they weren't going to do. They weren't going to do that, The guy had school at the time, just wanted to leave on the 24th of June. And I thought to myself, what am I going to do on the 24th of June once I leave school? And I'm so glad that they did a leavers program. I'm so glad we fought for it, because I'd have just been sat at home. I'd have been sat at home on my bum, probably doing nothing. Probably driving my parents nuts. But yeah, meltdowns, don't really have them as much. But I think it's when when our change has been sprung upon us. And I'm going to move to the next bit of the podcast, which is about anxiety and cleanliness. So welcome to this next part, this next section, which is anxiety and cleanliness. And as I've told a lot of people in this episode, that we've focused on anxiety. That's my Apple Watch pinging there. We focused on anxiety. You're going to go, hello, Stephen, we spoke about anxiety as the tip of the day. Well, we're going to talk about anxiety in cleanliness, sensory issues around cleanliness. So cleanliness seems to be a big thing. We all need to keep clean, right? Clean. We need to be clean because if we're not clean, we smell and nobody wants to be around us. They avoid us like the plague. They won't come near you. They won't sit next to you. It's just, you know what I mean? It's like, man, you smell bad. Now, there could be a reason of smelling bad. It could be medication you're on. Could be, I don't know. It could be a number of things. But we'll just stick it to that, okay? But for most people, cleanliness could be an absolute disaster. Okay, for example, the toothbrush in the mouth, for instance, for me, I don't get claustrophobic, but I just feel like, get the thing out of my mouth, It's like, I hate the feel of the brush in there, and it's like, the less time I have that brush in there, like, I've got an electric brush that I like the feel of, but I've not charged it up, and I need to charge it up. I just think, just the feel of the brush in the mouth, the toothbrush being in the mouth is, like disaster, It's like, and the taste of the toothpaste, which some people like the taste of toothpaste because they like the taste of gum. I think that's how I imagine it, but I don't like the taste of either, and I'm not even a minty person for that reason. So yeah, I just hate the feel in the mouth. I have to use hot water when I'm cleaning my teeth because cold water, I've got on the top left side of my mouth, I've got a sensitive area, and if any cold water goes near that, it just hurts it. I used to be able to eat ice cubes, I can't do that now. I used to be able to do it. But yeah, it just cringes. I've got a fantastic hygienist though, and she's brilliant, and so she knows the length of everything, and I even hate the taste of mouthwash. Just the thought of having mouthwash, it's just like gum in liquid form. It's just, I can't even describe how horrible it tastes. It's just vile. Even the colour of it is vile. Everything about mouthwash is vile. So I'm talking about cleanliness here, and this is like me dissing cleanliness. But, there's more anxiety around cleanliness. Some people don't keep clean because I was reading the other day on Facebook that apparently some people don't keep clean because people are anxious about cold water. Maybe there was an incident, a child, when they went in the shower and it was cold and it hurted them, That's kind of understandable, I mean, I remember the old showers. I remember one time in PE, I remember getting in that shower and just that freezing cold hitting you. And there was like a proper tap. And it was like, oh my gosh. And it would take ages to heat up. And then that hot water. And then you'd have to get out and you'd think, oh, that hot water, right? Just that hot water. Yeah, you'd think, oh baby, that hot water, that's just what, Then there's certain soap, like bars of soap, they feel terrible, you know? Bars of soap, man. Who uses bars of soap these days, man? Come on. We're living in the 21st century, you know? We're not living in the dark ages, man. You know? There is a joke about soap, but I'm not going to do that here. So moving on. You know? Some people don't like baths because... I mean, there's even elderly people who I've spoke to that get anxious about baths. Now, I'm not going to be one of these counsellors that says, oh, do you know, ordinary people, you know, normal people, they get anxious of a bath, so, you know, that's fine. That's normal. Because, you know, I had a fear about public toilets one time, which I'll discuss about it in a different podcast. But it was like, oh, well, I hate using a public toilet. It was like, gosh. But I don't want to be that bad counsellor. I want to say, do you know what? You know, there is elderly people that get anxious about, you know, getting stuck in the bath. You know, you can't get out of the bath. What if you're literally stuck in there? I mean, the bath, just sitting in the bath could be claustrophobic. You know, there's lots of things. Probably people have that fear that stuck with them from childhood, which is, you've seen that Rugrats episode where Chucky gets washed down the plug, or, well, he doesn't get washed down the plug, but that episode where you see the plug, and the guys who did the Rugrats episode, they made some great episodes, and that was one of them. The fear about getting washed down the plug hole is a real fear. A real fear, man. It's like, you know, if anyone's watched the water go down the plug hole, you know, and you hear that gurgly sound when you pull the plug, you know. Now, unfortunately, I don't have that fear. I love sitting in the bath. In fact, I lie in the bath. I can't get enough of the bath. I prefer baths to showers because you can laze around in the bath. You can't really laze around in the shower. But that's my reason why I love baths to showers. You know, I always think that you can take your time more in a bath, whereas you can't really in a shower. But that's just me. You know. So, but then again, you know, I don't like wooden toilet seats. But again, we'll come to that in another episode. There's an episode, I want to talk about toilets in another episode. But I do want to mention on toilets here that, you know, again, I've heard stories where people will not use toilet paper. They won't use, they won't use the expensive toilet paper. They would rather use the harsh toilet paper. And again, it's a sensory thing. I will tell you a funny story. In a place I used to work for, I knew someone that, because they'd run out of toilet paper, they used sandpaper to wipe their bum. That is a real, true story. Honest viewers' discretion. Please do not wipe your bum with sandpaper. It's seriously, just don't do it. But you know, I mean, people teach, you know, like, what toothpaste do people use? I want to ask a question in the comments, right? Because I'm thinking of changing my toothpaste, okay? What toothpaste do you think I should go for? Come on. I want to clean my teeth. Should I go back to using a smoker's toothpaste? Even though my hygienist says not to go for that way. Will it wreck my teeth if I go back to a smoker's toothpaste? I don't want a smoker's toothpaste where it's going to taste like nicotine. Ugh! Man! You know. That's another... Do you know, that's another episode. I want to talk about smells in another episode. Because, seriously, there is a whole heap of things here that lead to, even, and that's another thing, the smell of toothpaste just puts me off. And when I was younger, it's not so bad now, but when I used to go to the dentist, there was a dentist smell that I didn't like. I've overcome it now, but I wouldn't say overcome it, but I've found ways to deal with it. And so I think... now, before we move on, I just want to say there are ways of keeping clean. Find certain sponges, softer flannels, better toothbrushes. There's got to be ways, I've heard that people in this day and age still use charcoal. I might try it. I don't know. We're going to move on and talk about imaginary friends again, and actually tell you a bit more about the imaginary friends. And I won't be able to play with the cube in the next bit because I have to read a script. I have to read some notes, actually. I've prepared stuff based on what I've read. And just another little thing on cleanliness. I do hope people do keep clean. If you don't like the spray and deodorants because they're too cold and stuff, there's ways around that. You can get the stick ones. Again, if they are bad, just use softer stick deodorants. I'm sure there's ways. But hey guys, there was a time when I didn't use spray deodorants because they hurt my arms for a while, and then I went back to them. And in fact, I prefer spray deodorants. Well, I just use any. But I like spraying the deodorant. So I'm now going to skip on to imaginary friends. And we've got the little radio drama. And that should take us into the end of the podcast. There is also... I will do there's a little rant I've got for the end of the podcast, and after the end, for those who want to listen to it, there's a viewer's discretion bit at the end, and we'll talk about that near towards the end. So we're going to head to our next section now, which is imaginary friends, and I love this section of the podcast. It's my favourite bit of the podcast, and by the way, we're in episode 3. The next episode will be a really good one. I don't want any spoilers, but I know the next episode will be good. I've planned it to be good. So, imaginary friends, what are they? I can play with the cube because I've managed to go and read a bit. So, we know that in the last podcast, we talked about, first of all, the little debate, which I've carried on since the last podcast. Why is that not spinning for me? Spin for me. In the last podcast we discussed, are imaginary friends paranormal or not? And I kind of want to carry on the answer for this question. And the answer is, they could be. It depends. If you can see your imaginary friend, if you can see your imaginary friend, oops, that's hanging out of my pocket, didn't want that term. If you can see your imaginary friend, then 9 times out of a billion, that's gonna be paranormal. But if anything paranormal becomes your imaginary friend, they will usually have a different voice. And I know that from 2 experiences. The first experience was I was lying under the chair, and had this little voice, little chicken. Now, I can remember that was a different voice channeling through me, but at the time I actually heard it. I didn't know I was doing it. But I could mimic voices. I could mimic people from next door. Because I used to hear people, back in the day. I used to mimic people from church. I used to mimic people from films, TV. Oh, it was, what I did as a kid. And I used to mimic people on the radio. But this one day, this wasn't mimicked. This was perfect on key. And Mummy cried. And I thought she was mad with me because I'd lifted the cushion off the chair and I was in the garden. My dad came out to me. I was on the swing. I can't remember if I was on the swing or in my toy car. My dad came to my level. He opened the car door, sat on the swing, I can't remember, and he gave me a big cuddle and he said, "Just forget it, Stephen." And that's what I can remember. Now, usually, because see, when you did something wrong back in those days, or if you'd hurt yourself, Mum and Dad, they used to come and give you a cuddle and say, "Oh, it's all right." Or if you'd been naughty and, they'd say, "Look, Stephen, it's, you've done whatever wrong, but come on, you need to, I'm sorry with you, I've shouted and all this kind of thing." But, as parents do, they tell you off and they come back and, there's all that kind of thing, to show the love, but to know that you have done wrong. And, so yeah, and, but this day it was my dad sounded really serious. With my real dad, And I'll never forget it. It was, "Stephen, just forget it." It's like, it shouldn't be talked about. And I was like, "Well, Dad, I broke the chair." And he said, "No, Stephen, you didn't break the chair." He said, "You were playing a game underneath the chair and we'll just forget it for now." So I think, I can't remember what else he said, but, it was like, whoa, this was like, I didn't understand about ghosts or anything. Until I grew up. And there was another incident that happened. There was quite a few. The second incident happened when I was in my Auntie Ivy's house. My Auntie Ivy had died. I was sat on the organ stool, playing the organ, and she walked in. She walked in the hall, and there was no one else in the hall. They'd all gone in the other room, and she said to me, "Oh, what a wonderful boy playing that organ." And we talked, and I can't remember what the conversation was about. We had a full-blown conversation, and I remember everyone's, "Right, everyone, let's get in the car." And Mummy's, and it was the same with Uncle Jeff, because I'd seen Uncle Jeff on that day. And I said to Mummy, "Mummy, where's Uncle Jeff?" And I got someone shouted at me. I was like, "Oh, but I've just spoken to him." And so, these were like odd things, and these people had passed on. But you got to remember, I was about 6 or 7. Now, another weird thing happened that time, and I didn't know anything about the paranormal. I was a kid, and I really wished at that time I understood certain things, because I tell you something, there's a lot I'd be able to understand now. Where this was imaginary or not, I do not know. But there was a ghost in my nana's house, and it was broad daylight. This was broad daylight when it happened, and I sat down. I was on my bed, right, with my imaginary friend Grace at the time, and I was sat on my bed, and I was listening to Wet, Wet, Wet at probably full volume. The window was open. Okay, the window was open. I was listening to the Wet, Wet, Wet CD at hot volume. Right, I was about 7 years of age. 7. 7. I was still 6, so I hadn't even turned 7 yet. Right? And bear in mind, I was a kid. And I heard this brushing up against somewhere. I didn't know where it was coming from. I, honest to goodness, didn't know where it was coming from. And I said, hello, window cleaner, it's me. You know, I said, it's Beavy here. I said, hey, do you like wet, wet, wet window cleaner? And the brushing carried on. And then my dad noticed something. Notice how my dad comes in on all of these ones. He comes in on this one. And he opened the door and he said, hey, Stephen, who were you talking to there? I said, oh, Grace, my imaginary friend, and then there was the window cleaner. He went out and closed the door. I'll say that much. Because my dad knew what it really was. But I'm going to talk about something now which... the last paranormal story. And then I want to talk about something else. And then we'll lead you into the radio play. Because what I want to do is, instead of having a poll, I want to keep the debate going, or the whole series. Are imaginary friends, are they paranormal or not? I'm not going to say they are, I'm not going to say they're not. This is a thing that keeps rolling on. It keeps... I don't know. We don't know what's on out there. We don't know what people's belief systems are. And obviously, I'm not going to push that through the podcast because I don't want to upset people. But what I do want to do is... I'm sitting on the fence with this. I'm still going to sit on the fence with this. Because the last podcast, I ended out with, are imaginary friends paranormal or not? After reading... I was watching a YouTube video and reading through the comments and thinking, well, this is a great argument to have in the podcast, because what if imaginary friends, what if we've had an experience where we've been playing with our imaginary friend and they've turned out not to be imaginary? Where's all that all come from? You know? There's an account online. You've all read the story about Lisa. If you haven't, I suggest you go online and read. But for those who can't go online and read, I'll tell you this now. Lisa was apparently this little girl's made-up friend, and she lived underneath the sandpit. Well, that goes straight off the bat there. That tells you what's going on. And Lisa did terrible things. She did something horrible to her school, to the teacher of the girl. And apparently she left for a while, but then she wanted Lisa to come back. And when Lisa came back, she came back with a vengeance. So that's the story there. And the paintings that it's been discussed on forums and across social media, and there's literally tons of YouTube videos. There's even a YouTube documentary about this Lisa thing. And, I believe Lisa was something paranormal. But where's the proof? I wasn't in the room. But Um, yeah, paranormal stuff. Um, hey, it happens. And imaginary friends, they're a part of that field. We all make our own atmospheres. We all, we all create an atmosphere. We all create that, that's a part of our, personas, if you will. But, there's plenty of sitting on and off the fence. And it depends what fence that you sit on or get off. It depends. Because I don't want people saying, well, in actual fact, this is something that, well, this is something that's, whatever. But the last story I want to tell you is about something which occurred in my dream. And it came in my dream, but it came out of my dream. And I'm recording this at night, so I don't want to talk too much about this. But this thing, and it affected the way I thought. And it made me think, what's the difference between the dream world and the real world? It stopped me from getting a lot of sleep. And people's sleep deprivation can be down to the amount of imagination that one has to hold in. And I had to hold a lot back in when things came out from the dream world into the real world. I told my imaginary friends in because, talking to myself was bad. Also, the things I imagined was bad, or seemed bad. And then, I don't know, I heard a great song by Captain Beefheart, where he's going on about this planet. He's talking about Venus, but it's the way he explains it, and it gives you a different perception of thinking, a thinking which people didn't like me having. So it was a thinking that I had to stop. But I couldn't. There were issues in that time of life. But there were experiences that I have had, which, spiritual things. Like we were on the beach one time. I want to tell this story because it's a fantastic story. We used to go with a friend. Me and my sister, we used to go with a couple of friends, and we used to take instruments: ocean drums, flutes, tambourines. And I liked this one night. I had the pan flute, and that is a very spiritual instrument, I feel. I had the pan flute, and Becky had the tin flute. Sorry, my friend had the tin flute. Got to be careful not to mention names in this podcast. Had the tin flute, and we did a lot of recording. My favourite instrument, by the way, was the ocean drum. And we used to walk on the beach because we weren't really allowed to make that much music in the house because of the neighbours. So what we did was, we decided that we'd have a jam session walking along the beach. And this one night, I had the pan flute. I'll never forget this. And my friend had the tin flute. And my friend was playing the tin whistle, and I was playing the pan flute. And all of a sudden, we heard angels. And they were playing back to us. But I could actually see them as well. And again, I was only 7 at the time. 7. You know, what an age. So, you know, are imaginary friends paranormal or real? But is there something, is there a part of our imagination that homes into spirituality? Is there a part of our subconscious? I mean, dreams. Is a dream, is that going into the imaginary world? When we go to sleep at night, do we go into this imaginary world? Or do we stay in the real world? But it's just our mind focusing on it. Let me know what you think. This is a big topic. We've overthought a lot here, and we've discussed a lot here, to the point where I feel, let's get into the radio play. So our play starts where Rosemary is at the bank. So, Rosemary, let's have a look at your bank statement. Oh, dearie me, Rosemary, you've been using that card again. What? I've been using my card? Yes, I'm really sorry, missus. Let me have a look. Let's see. You're due in next week. Let's see. Yeah, that's when you're due in next. Oh, I'm really sorry. I'll just phone my husband. My boyfriend, sorry. Yeah, you can use this phone. Hello, Andy. The credit card statement is terrible. I'm really sorry. I'll come home and explain. I think it's going to take more than that to explain. You see what you've done here? You've used your card in loads of places. My word. Let me just have a look at that again. Oh, yes. You've used your card in 10 places. My word. Rosemary, how can you explain that? I don't know. Well, you really want to be careful when you're using your card. I know. Well, if you could just give me your name and number. Oh, of course. Let me just grab a wee... oh, yes, it's right here. Here you go, Rosemary. Thanks. Now, mind how you go spending your money, because you've only got 20% on your card. Now, hold on, just before you go. Would you like a loan? Oh, yes. Don't tell your boyfriend about this wee loan that you've got here. It's a special loan and we don't do it to everybody, you know. So don't go telling everybody, because they'll be all here, you know. I won't, George. Right. And don't go telling everybody in the street now. I don't want everybody at the Royal Cave knowing. So Andy was sat at home and he gets a phone call from the Royal Cave. Hello, Andy's flat. Yeah, go on. has she now? Who did she see? George? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Nervous? Was she nervous? She's sometimes like that. I mean, she's good going, giving everything she gets, but when she gets that statement, oh, I know, isn't it terrible? Yeah. Yeah, I thought I gave you those details. Yeah, I did. Well, I'm just gonna head out because I'm gonna go out with the boys and yeah. Okay. Bye. Bye for now. Apparently, when Rosemary gets home later, she has a lot to tell Andy.
So, you going to the pub tonight, love?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, well, I just want to sit down and tell you this.
It's alright, I've had a call from the Royal Cave. They've said about your card statement.
Yeah, well, you see, George, he's sorting us out, but he's told me not to tell you.
Well, you haven't got a loan again, have you?
I have.
Find out next week, as I'm wondering what happens with Rosemary's loan, and does Andy get the shock of his life? Will George be annoyed to hear that Rosemary has told Andy about his little thing? Find out in next week's Imaginary Friends segment. So this is where we reach the end of the podcast, and we're sorry if it's been a little late getting out and everything, but it's just putting everything together. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, and don't forget to tune into next week's episode 4, where we have a lot in that podcast. I can reassure you now. Where'd I put my sensory cube? Be a nice handy little... Yeah, here it is. Let's look for my sensory cube. So to finish, just one little, just a few rubbishy little jokes to end the podcast with. And the first one is, what's a computer's favourite food? Chocolate chips. And there's another one, what's between B and D? C, that's if you can swim, if you can get there. And yeah, they're just a nice few little jokes. Hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and I shall see you in next week's episode 4. There was going to be something at the end of this podcast, but I'm going to put it at the end of... No, I'm going to put it in the 5th episode now. It's going to be the end of both these episodes, but I'm going to put it in the 5th episode, because the 5th episode is more geared to that. So guys, without further ado, hope you've enjoyed this podcast like I've enjoyed making it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.